The Parker family, David, Emma, their teenage daughter Sophie, and 6-year-old Liam, had always dreamed of leaving the noise and chaos of city life behind. When they stumbled upon a charming countryside home nestled among rolling hills and sprawling meadows, it felt like fate. The house was everything they had hoped for. Spacious yet cozy, with a wide porch perfect for summer evenings and a basement that David planned to turn into a workshop. For the first few weeks, life at the new house was idyllic. Sophie spent her afternoons painting in the garden, Liam explored the nearby woods with their golden retriever, Max, and Emma relished the quiet mornings with her coffee and a book. David, ever the handyman, threw himself into small projects, fixing squeaky hinges and repainting faded shutters. It felt like the fresh start they needed. But the peace didn't last. It began with Liam's discovery in the basement. "Dad," he called one afternoon, his voice echoing up the stairs. "There's a door down here, but it's locked." David frowned, descending the stairs. He had spent hours in the basement unpacking and organizing but hadn't noticed any door besides the one leading to the laundry room. Yet there it was. A small, weathered door tucked into the far corner, partially obscured by a stack of old crates. Its surface was unremarkable, but the heavy iron lock that secured it seemed oddly out of place. "That's strange," David murmured, kneeling to inspect it. He tugged at the handle, but the door didn't budge. "It's probably just a storage closet. I'll look for the key later." But no key surfaced, and as the days passed, Liam's fascination with the door grew. "What's behind it?" he asked over breakfast. "Why is it locked?" Emma chuckled, ruffling his hair. "It's probably just empty, sweetheart. Don't worry about it." But Liam wasn't convinced. He began spending more time in the basement, sitting cross-legged in front of the door, as if waiting for it to reveal its secrets. Sophie teased him, calling it his secret clubhouse, but even she admitted there was something unsettling about the door. Then the whispers began. At first, they were faint, almost imperceptible. Emma thought she heard her name while folding laundry, and David swore he heard laughter when no one else was home. But as the days passed, the whispers grew louder, more distinct, until there was no denying their presence. Sophie, ever skeptical, brushed it off as wind or the house settling. But Liam's reaction was different. "They're talking to me," he told Emma one night, his wide eyes brimming with fear. "They want me to open the door." Emma's blood ran cold. She tried to reassure him, brushing off his words as a child's imagination, but the unease lingered. The next morning, she shared Liam's claim with David, who decided it was time to deal with the door once and for all. With a crowbar in hand, David descended into the basement, Emma close behind. Sophie and Liam watched anxiously from the top of the stairs. The lock was old but sturdy, and it took several minutes of effort before it finally gave way with a loud snap. David hesitated, his hand on the handle, before pulling the door open. The air that wafted out was cold and damp, carrying a faint metallic tang. Behind the door was a narrow staircase spiraling downward, disappearing into darkness. Emma shivered. "This doesn't make sense," she whispered. "The blueprints didn't show anything like this." "Stay here," David instructed, grabbing a flashlight. "I'll take a quick look." The stairs creaked under his weight as he descended, the beam of his flashlight cutting through the thick darkness. The space below was massive, far larger than the house above should have allowed. The walls were rough-hewn stone, and the floor was littered with debris. Broken furniture, scattered bones, and symbols scrawled in dark, dried streaks that David didn't want to identify. At the center of the cavern stood an altar, its surface covered in melted candles and more of the strange symbols. David's stomach churned as he approached, his flashlight trembling in his grip. He reached out to touch one of the carvings, but a low growl echoed through the cavern, stopping him cold. He spun around, the flashlight beam darting wildly. Shadows danced across the walls, shifting and coalescing into forms that were almost, but not quite, human. David backed away slowly, his heart hammering in his chest. The growl grew louder, joined by a chorus of whispers that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "David!" Emma's voice called from the top of the stairs, snapping him out of his trance. He turned and bolted up the steps, slamming the door shut behind him. "What did you see?" Emma demanded, her face pale. David shook his head. I don't know. But we need to seal that door. The family spent the next few days avoiding the basement, but the house itself seemed to rebel against their decision. Objects moved on their own, doors slammed in the middle of the night, and the whispers became a constant presence. Liam began waking up screaming, claiming shadowy figures were watching him from the corners of his room. Desperate for answers, Emma turned to the local library, digging through old records and newspapers. She found a single mention of their property in an article from the late 1800s. The previous owner, a recluse named Elias Harrow, had been accused of conducting dark rituals. He vanished under mysterious circumstances, and the house had changed hands countless times since, each owner leaving under strange and often tragic circumstances. Armed with this knowledge, Emma confronted David. "We can't stay here," she said. "This place isn't safe." David nodded, his resolve faltering. "I'll start looking for a new place," he promised. But the entities had other plans. One night, as the family sat in the living room, the door to the basement creaked open on its own. A chill filled the room, and the whispers grew deafening. The Parkers froze, their terror palpable as the shadows began to seep out from the open door, twisting and writhing like living smoke. "We need to seal it," David said, his voice barely audible over the cacophony. "Now." Grabbing the materials he had prepared earlier, boards, nails, and a can of salt, David and Emma hurried to the basement. Sophie and Liam clung to each other, their eyes wide with fear. As David worked to nail the door shut, Emma spread a line of salt along the threshold, reciting a protection prayer she had found in her research. But the shadows didn't retreat. Instead, they pressed against the door, causing it to bulge and splinter. A guttural roar shook the house, and the symbols on the altar flashed in David's mind. "The ritual," he said suddenly. "We have to finish the ritual." Emma hesitated but nodded. Together, they descended into the cavern once more, the oppressive darkness threatening to smother them. The altar seemed to pulse with energy, and the shadows coiled around it like snakes. Following Emma's research, they began the ritual, using the candles and symbols she had copied from the library archives. The air grew colder with each word they spoke, and the shadows writhed in agony. The cavern trembled, and a deafening roar filled the space as the final incantation was spoken. The shadows converged on the altar, their forms twisting and collapsing inward until they vanished with a blinding flash of light. When the light faded, the cavern was silent. The oppressive energy was gone, replaced by an eerie calm. David and Emma climbed the stairs, their limbs heavy with exhaustion. The basement door was closed, and the house was quiet once more. The Parkers left the house the next morning, taking only what they could carry. They never returned, and the house was left to decay, its secrets buried beneath layers of dust and neglect. But those who passed by swore they could hear whispers on the wind, and at night, a faint glow emanated from the basement window, as if the shadows were waiting for someone to find them again.